Ladies and gentlemen, we have breaking news of the enormous variety. This just came across on Twitter from Adam Schefter. I'm checking, as I'm saying this, I'm checking to make sure this is legitimate. It is Adam Schefter's official account. We've got the blue check here. Many folks commenting on it. This appears to be legitimate. Yes, Rich Samini echoing it now. Robert Saleh, Jets head coach, has been fired. Wow. This is not a shock because it wasn't deserved. This is a shock because, as I have said, as anyone who follows this team has been saying for a few weeks now, or even just a couple of weeks, but echoed it last year, Woody Johnson has never fired a head coach in season ever. This is a first for the New York Jets under Woody Johnson. Robert Saleh, who compiled a 20-36 record over his time with the team, is gone. There is no word here. Again, I'm just reading the Twitter feed. No word. Oh, here it is now. Zach Rosenblatt. Jeff Ulbrich will take over as interim head coach. Now, listen, this makes sense in terms of you want a coordinator who's had some success. Yes, Peter, this just happened. Breaking news in the last few minutes. Robert Saleh has been fired. Jeff Ulbrich taking over as the team's head coach. There was a report the other day that I saw. I wasn't sure if it was legitimate or not, but it claimed Woody Johnson left his owner's box during the second quarter of that loss in London. Woody Johnson flying all the way over here to watch that game, watches his team fall behind 17-0, and he's had enough. I said it last year. I was out on Saleh with the Beningo thing. I repeated that the other day. Robert Saleh out, really just a shocking development. Only, again, not because it wasn't deserved, but because this is it's unprecedented for these owners to do what they've just done. So Robert Saleh gone. Ulbrich takes over for him. Now, who's going to call the defense? We'll have to wait and see there. What does this mean for the offense? Does Nate Hackett survive this? Because I can't imagine the New York Jets fired Robert Saleh without the blessing of Aaron Rodgers. And it's possible they didn't. Maybe things have gotten bad enough because, listen, you cannot think of a time in recent history, as bad as the Jets have been, you cannot tell me there's been a time where the expectations and the results had such a disparity. JC just said it again. Hackett needs to be gone. Look, Jay, I don't see scapegoat. I mean, I think Saleh and Hackett were the major problem. I mean, we've talked about this. I jokingly, I won't even say jokingly, I angrily, as I sat in that game the other day with my kid, I was messaging back and forth with my co-host Dylan Terman, Chris Schubert, and I was in such a rotten mood, down 17-0. I messaged and said to them, it feels like Zach Wilson never left after the Aaron Rodgers pick. Lo and behold, not long after the game and a few times since then, you see the tweets that the New York Jets through 5 games have scored 93 points. Last season, with Zach Wilson at quarterback through 5 games, the Jets had scored 93 points. It was literally the exact same results. The only difference is that last year's group, and I tweeted this yesterday, and it got a fair number of people responded to it. Look at what this team has done. You've replaced, from last year, Zach Wilson, Aaron Rodgers comes in, and now he's your quarterback. You replace Mekhi Becton, who everybody said sucked. Everyone said he was garbage. Mekhi Becton, gone. In his place, Tyron Smith, Hall of Famer. Yes, aging, I get it. But last year, played 14, 15 games, played absolutely fine. Gave up 1 sack every 200 snaps. This year, one sack every 50. Joe Tippmann, you expected him to be your center. He's your center. Played most of last year. One of the only guys who stayed healthy. Left guard. You replaced Laken Tomlinson, who was an absolute disaster, and you replaced him with Simpson. And AVT is now your starter at guard again instead of the carousel of journeymen. And Morgan Moses / Olu Fashanu are your starting tackles in place of the carousel at right tackle last year. Someone had the nerve on Twitter to tell me those were not upgrades. Some people, they're beyond help. Huge upgrades across the board. Breece Hall, at this point last year, 7.1 yards per carry through 5 games with the O-line they had last year. This year, 3. 3 yards per carry through 5 games. From 7.1 to 3 with an improved line and an improved quarterback. Zach Rosenblatt tweeted it the other day. The Jets, I think, are 28th in the league in the percentage of snaps on offense they've played with stacked boxes. And we talked about this. We said that once Aaron Rodgers got here, the stacked boxes would go. And that's why we thought Breece Hall would have all this running room, because look at what he did against all these stacked boxes. Now the stacked boxes are gone, and he can't gain an inch. You can't tell me this team doesn't have more talent than what they're producing on the field. So listen, whether this came from Joe Douglas, whether this came from, Woody, obviously, when it comes to hiring and firing of coaches, you can say the GM is the boss and the coach reports to him. You're not firing a head coach without the go-ahead from the owner. So we don't know if it came from Douglas, but at some point, somebody had enough. Robert Saleh gone. And I'll say this briefly because nobody cares, but I get it. I like Saleh as a person. I think he's a really good dude, but that's as far as this needs to go. I sent the link to join in to my co-hosts, Chris Schubert, Dylan Turman. Obviously, we had no idea this was happening. I was about to come on to talk about a different topic. Chris, any news in your world today worth talking about? And Chris abruptly leaves. I guess he had nothing to say. No, I don't know if Chris got cut off. He was about to start talking, and he went. So hopefully he joins back in. But again, let's see. I'm just refreshing the old Twitter here. Yes, Ulbrich is the interim. Nothing beyond that. I'm shocked, folks. I am genuinely, truly shocked. What huge story out of left field. And here's Chris. Chris is having some connectivity issues. I just clicked to add him to the room, and he went again. So if you're just joining us, Robert Saleh, New York Jets head coach, officially let go after a 2-3 start. Listen, KJ says you fire Hackett, but not Saleh, or you fire Saleh, but not Hackett. Wholly agree there. Something else will come of this, I would imagine. You can't imagine they've fired the head coach for this epic failure, but the offensive side of the ball, where the true failure comes from, isn't going to see something change. Whether Ulbrich has to step in and say, guys, incorporate some motion. Guys, join this century. I get you like your system. Guess what? It's not working. So, Ulbrich, listen, I'm, again, not unhappy at all. Very surprised. Third time. No, Chris is gone again. I'll stop mentioning Chris until we actually get his. I promise you he is trying to jump on and join the discussion. Yes, beloved piece, this is for real. I'm as shocked as you are. I may not even get to it now. I was logging in to talk about Connor Hughes' comment yesterday about Joe Douglas and the potential Davante Adams deal being hung up by people above him who are controlling the purse strings. I thought, let's hop on it. And we will touch on that in a few minutes. I thought, let me hop on. And then I see the tweet, Robert Saleh fired. And I thought, well, that was fake. This is a fake account because they don't fire head coaches in season. And then another tweet. And I'm like, this looks like Schefter's account. Got the blue check. The spelling is right. People are starting to comment on it. And then Samini followed that up seconds later. So it's real. It's legit. Yeah, let's see. So, yep, Chris says trying to join. Service not very good where he is. Keep trying, Chris. Be great to get you on. OC and O-line coaches are next. I can't imagine that, Max. And the reason being, I'm not saying Michael Kazik says Beningo is now the Jets head coach. Jesus. Listen, now he can hang out with Saleh all the time. But again, we've got to see, you can't fire a defensive-minded head coach where all the failure is on offense and not make some changes on offense. But again, maybe it's accountability. Maybe Woody has finally grown tired of watching this team come out. And it was the main point of my video the other day. Flat. Come out flat all the time. And it's the same, repeat. Robert Saleh repeating, we're going to get it fixed. We're going to get it fixed. What are you going to change, Robert? Nothing. We're going to keep doing the same thing, but we're going to get it fixed. I mean, I feel like Woody gave him a lot of leeway. And Woody waited, and you'll have to bear with me here. I'm still like, wow, this happened. Saleh's gone. Again, only because the history. And I said it the other day. The point I made the other day, which obviously I was wrong, when the Jets didn't fire Todd Bowles in season, when he let Matt Barkley of the Bills light him up, hang 40 on him as a third string quarterback, and I think he was a short week, whatever, who cares, short week or not, it was Barkley, and Bowles was supposed to be this genius, and they got 41 scoring on them. When they didn't fire Todd Bowles after that game, I just thought they are never going to fire a coach in season. That's as embarrassing as a performance you'll ever see in your life for a defensive coach, and they kept him around. So Bowles got more wiggle room. But again, listen, I know Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas have a good working relationship, but maybe Joe Douglas went to Woody and said, look, man, I hired this guy, but let's be honest, he's not what we thought he was. Too friendly with the players, too worried about what the players think of him, not willing to, put his foot down and put an end to the miscues and the mistakes, the penalties, and all this stuff over the years that have just kept always being an issue. Woody Johnson obviously hit his breaking point. Rich says it's crazy. He should have finished the season. Rich, I don't know that I agree with that. And I'll tell you why. There's little reason to believe anything would have changed under Saleh because nothing has changed under Saleh since he got here. They got him Aaron Rodgers, and his offense is performing to the same level that it was when they had Zach Wilson. And Woody may not know when he's going to have a quarterback again, even though we can say Rodgers lost them the game the other day and Rodgers hasn't been Rodgers. Rodgers cannot be Rodgers, but he can also be the best quarterback Woody has ever had. And Woody Johnson might be looking at this and saying, I'm watching Aaron Rodgers limp around, watching a gimpy 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers, both knees are hurt, the ankle is hurt. Woody might be thinking, A, this guy may not make it through the season, and if he does, he ain't coming back next year. I've owned this team for a long time. I want a damn ring. This guy, this head coach, it's an embarrassment, and I don't know when I'm going to have a quarterback again. I'm not going to let this guy continue to let his team make the same mistakes over and over and over again and not do something about it. So Woody has done something about it. And again, I've heard many people call for Saleh to be fired. I have agreed that he deserves to be fired. But I think the consensus among, fans and writers, pundits, is that the Jets don't do this. They just don't fire guys in season, so he's here. I did say the other day, I've said a couple times now, the only way I could see Robert Saleh getting fired is if Aaron Rodgers went, yeah, we got to get rid of this guy. And it happened. I don't know that the Rodgers thing happened. The firing happened. So that's crazy. Rich, focus on next year. We don't know that yet, Rich. You come in and make a couple of tweaks to this offense. First of all, and again, listen, there aren't, number one, you can still trade for Devontae Adams if ownership signs off on that. You can, little changes. Like, who would you rather see catching a pass at this point, Malachi Corley or Xavier Gibson? Like, we know Corley has some skill set that he can use to gain some yards. So why not do that? Let's get Corley involved. Watch the blocking from the tight ends. It's been atrocious. You've got Anthony Firkser on this practice squad. Bring him up. Then you're blocking again. These aren't earth-shattering moves that I'm saying all of a sudden the Jets are going to score 35 points a game. But you can get a little better. And so maybe the tight end who's an absolute dead weight, a liability as a blocker, you pull that guy off the field, you put in Firkser, who's a okay-ish blocker, veteran guy, has proven he can get it done. You pull Gibson, who's giving you nothing on offense, and you add in Malachi Corley. And let's not forget, folks, while we're look, accountability, I'm all for it. Aaron Rodgers hurt them the other day. Okay? They had a lot. Alan Lazard had 4 drops. Conklin had a ball that was catch. Now, granted, it would have taken a great catch, but it was a catchable ball. Like they probably had 6 drops total on some chunk plays. So Rodgers wasn't great, but he was better than the box score indicated. If Alan Lazard holds on to that touchdown that hits him in both hands, granted, I get his view was obstructed, but the football still hit you in both hands, and you knew it was coming because you put them there. It wasn't like it was a surprise. If Lazard holds on to that ball, different story. So this offense, they've got to make some changes, absolutely, but there are some things they can do to be a little bit better. And if you replace Alan Lazard with Devontae Adams, if you had Devontae Adams instead of Alan Lazard the other day, you win that game. Plain and simple. You win that football game. And oddly enough, Robert Saleh probably still has a job. But as it stands, he does not. Brian, how are we doing, Brian? Good friend of mine. Let's see. If they were content to focus on next year, this wouldn't have happened today. This is clearly being an attempt to... Exactly, Brian. This is the point I'm making, is that Woody Johnson is probably looking at this and saying, my beat-up 40-year-old quarterback isn't coming back next year, and we go back to being an NFL team that doesn't know who their quarterback is. Maybe Jordan Travis is the answer. I love that pick, projecting him to the Jets. Look, he's got some talent. He can run. He's got a good enough arm. By all accounts, phenomenal leader in college. Liked him pre-draft, like him now, but develop him. Don't rush him. Draft another quarterback this year. Draft one every damn year. They should have been doing that for the past 37 years. They might have found one. Let's see. Rich says, hope this fire lights a fire under the... Well, listen, we talk about the coach firing bump, right? Teams, we saw it. Jeff Saturday won a game as Coach Little League. The Colts won his first game. I don't know if they won another one after that. The Raiders last year against the Jets, Antonio Pierce. When you bring in a new coach, it does something in that locker room that you see teams get a little bit fired up, a little extra oomph, and they come out and win a football game, which, by the way, if the Jets were to do that, they would be tied for first place. That's right now, the best thing the Jets have going for them is that the rest of the AFC East is a joke. The Bills not living up. Listen, the Jets and Bills are in the same boat. Neither team is playing to expectations, and they have a chance to be tied for first place if they can pull off a win. So let's hope this team comes out fired up with a new head coach. Let's hope that with the new head coach, there are some new ideas. Let's hope there's some accountability. Let's hope we see guys get pulled if they make mistakes, things like that. And good for Ulbrich. You know, he's been a really good coach in his job. When I spoke to him at the Senior Bowl and asked about, possible coaching opportunity, head coaching opportunity, he said, look, I understand it's cyclical, and you gotta, normally like you gotta have a good year as a DC, like a big enough year to kind of get on the radar, and then do it again to show you belong on the radar. And so I think Ulbrich was expecting some possible head coaching interviews going, into this coming off season. But now look, hey Jeff, win some playoff games and you've got a head coaching job. That's kind of where he is right now. So let's see. What else do we have here? Best news I've heard all year. There is a God. Hate to see anyone get sacked around and lose their job, but something had to give. And look, Ed, I feel the same way. I said a couple minutes ago, I like Saleh. Good guy. Don't hate him. Don't wish him any ill will. Hope he has success somewhere else. But it just wasn't working here. And he wasn't making changes. And people were getting a little bit too tired of, of the same old, we're going to fix it. We're going to fix it, but never fixing it. We aren't winning anything with Hackett at OC. But listen, okay, Satoshi, you said two things here. One is true. One is could not be further from the truth. We're not winning anything with Hackett. I could see that. And I get the concern. But purely symbolic, like you fired the head coach. Symbolic is you fire a position coach, maybe a coordinator. That's firing your head coach isn't just symbolic. Like this sends shockwaves through the organization. The guys in that locker room are probably beside themselves. The defense, who plays their behinds off every week and is one of the best in the NFL, they might even not be thrilled about this. I can't say that for sure. I'm sure. Look, there's enough guys in there. I'm sure the opinions are all over the map. Let's see. The Lebanon flag. Peter says Saleh wore a Lebanon flag. Woody is political. Not going to delve into that as much, Peter, because I'll only mention I've seen that mentioned somewhere else because I was surprised. But someone commented on that and said the league is like pushing, like they want they want coaches to sort of dig into their roots and their heritage and diversity and sort of I think that was something the league wanted. It wasn't anything to do with what's going on in the world politically as much as like represent your roots. So I don't think that was a solid thing. And if it was, yeah, I don't think the league would allow it, to be honest. I never even noticed it. And I mean, I've seen enough people say it. I guess he's wearing it somewhere. I don't know if it's on his lapel or what, but I don't think that's it. I really don't. GM Island Empire thought it would be yesterday. Listen, just didn't think it would be this year. I didn't think we would see this happen. Ulbricht's a fiery guy and an NFL player. Yeah, well, listen, Saleh was fiery too, but he just didn't hold guys accountable. But this is huge. This entire staff is gone after the season. I couldn't be happier. That could be the case. We'll see how it goes. My info, no Rex Ryan. No, it's not going to be Rex. Listen, I love Rex, but you're not bringing a guy, from outside to implement a new system, and that's just so difficult. You almost have to promote from within. The downside here is that, and this is something I mentioned the other day, and then it came up. Nick Faria mentioned it on Play Like a Jet with Scott Mason. Talked about how there's only been one time in league history. And again, this is according to Nick Faria. I haven't looked this up myself, but I actually asked the question on my show the day before and kind of said, what's going on here? There's only been one time in league history that a coach was replaced in season and made the playoffs. Because listen, when you get fired in season, that generally means the season is well underway, that you're at week 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you have a bad record. So the chances of turning that around, the odds are against you. So maybe Woody Johnson, by doing this now, by doing this week 5 instead of week 8 or 9, maybe he sees the opportunity. It's almost as if, actually, it's not almost as if, it is. If the Jets win Sunday, let's say hypothetically that they get the head coach bump I'm talking about. Let's say they win Monday night. It's almost like the season starts over. You're in first place. You're at 500. You've won as many of you as you've lost. You're in first place, tied with the team in your division. So for the Jets and Bills, it's almost like a reset button. Like, okay, we're back at 0. And the Jets, if they beat the Bills, they'll have that win over them. That may give them they probably be in first place. But in terms of wins, if you're both sitting there at 3-3, and the Dolphins and the Patriots can't find a win, you're back at, it's like opening day again. It's like you're playing a shortened season. You've got 11 games, right? Well, we're not at, yeah, you'd have 11 games left, and you would be you'd be in a first place tie. That, rather than waiting till you're 2-5, 3-6, 3-7, when you're going to have to go on a run of 4 in a row, 5 in a row to get to 500. That's why teams that fire head coaches rarely make the playoffs. It's because you're usually a team that's doing terribly. Let's see what else we have in the chat. Todd Downing should be calling plays. Listen, Dylan Turman's talked about that. I would have zero objection. This is much better news than adding Adams, which they still could do. Rodgers will be gone. He's a realist, man. Will not be gone. Will not be gone when, though? I don't think he'll be gone this year, but I think next year. Yeah, Tails says, Tails from an asphalt jockey says he thinks Rodgers will retire after the season. Yeah, he keeps getting beat up like this. He's not hanging around. Let's take a look. What else we've got? But no, somebody wants Vrabel. No, thanks. Woody's not selling the Jets, folks. We gotta get over that one. Firing the coach is insane. That's from Draco Pugh. I disagree, Draco. The same mistakes, same sorry excuses, no answers to any questions, can't fix the penalties. The team, listen, Robert Saleh, what did we hear all offseason? Oh, this year I'm going to be more involved with the offense. Well, where'd that get you? Maybe that's part of the problem. And I said all along that getting this guy involved isn't necessarily a good thing. Just because you have more people taking part in something doesn't mean they're all qualified. So I don't see that as insane at all. Saleh lost the locker room last season. Look, week 17, they played their butts off. I don't think that's true. I think they liked him. Let's go Ulbrich. If I was Ulbrich, I wouldn't take the job with Hackett as OC. Listen, if you're Ulbrich and you think you can do enough every coordinator wants to be a head coach. Well, most coordinators want to be a head coach. If that's what Ulbrich wants and he's willing to bet on himself, he'll take the job. But he will be the head coach. So he can go to him. He can go to Hackett and say, let's mix it up a little bit. Let's incorporate some motion. Let's stop with the run, pass. Or the obvious run plays. That's one criticism that I've had of this team that you've probably heard. I've heard a lot of it this week from pundits, from folks on Twitter, SNY, that Connor Rogers said it, and Willie Colon, nodding along in agreement. This offense is too predictable. And someone tweeted to me earlier that it's and it is. So if Ulbrich gets involved and says, I'm going to have the headset on, and if you guys run something that I, as a defensive guy, think is too damn predictable, I'm gonna yell at you to switch it up. No, don't run that. So we'll see. Mark says Vrabel. I'm not sold on Vrabel. A lot of reports that he was a big problem there. Draco Pugh. Let's see. Run blocking was junior league. Running back lining up 20 yards behind the QB. Absolutely. No offense, no motion. I said it earlier. I don't know if you hadn't tuned in yet. We got to see more motion. We got to see more variety. This is what I'm talking about. So you can't tell me that Hackett and Rodgers don't know how to do those things. They just choose not to. So now it's up to the new head coach to say, do these things. Eric says, why not Bill Belichick? We've talked about this. Belichick hates the Jets. I was always wishy-washy on that. Like, does he really hate them? We just saw Bill Belichick voluntarily roast and trash the Jets for not liking Sam Darnold. Everyone in the NFL likes Sam Darnold except the Jets. Yeah, and the other teams that didn't keep him, Bill. So, Bill, if you're taking pot shots at a team, then you're clearly not interested. Listen, maybe if you throw him enough money, maybe he'll do it, but I just don't see that happening. Way to go, Jets. See the Lebanese flag thing I don't mix my sports and politics. To me, sports is a way to get the hell away from that garbage. Laughing stock of an organization. Listen, you can't argue that, but I don't think this move is what does it. This is a move that says, hey, we're not, we realize we have a chance to do something here, and it's not happening with this coach. So we're not going to sit here and let the season slip away. So I would say not really a laughing stock move here. This is we're still all in and we want to do this move. Imagine kickoff time Monday night. You've got Robert Saleh gone and Devontae Adams lining up in place of Allen Lazard. Right? I mean, come on. Let's see. Hiring Hackett set the Jets back. Listen, when they that was like I joked about that on the message boards at Jet Nation, which, by the way, you should be there on the message boards at Jet Nation, most active Jets boards on the web. And I said, half jokingly, I said, you know what this team is going to do? And this is before the Hackett hire. I said, as bad as Paul Hackett was, his son is going to be the next guy. And he was. It was, that was an unbelievable decision from that team. Real quick. Hang on one second. All right. For anybody just tuning in. Let's see. John McLaughlin said this was needed. It absolutely was. Asphalt Jockey says, doesn't see Bill wanting to come here. I agree. Vrabel, I'm not so sure about it. Listen, if you're going to go get a coach, get an offensive guy. Isn't it weird, though, that as Jets fans for years, we've been like, bring an offensive guy, bring an offensive guy. The last two offensive guys they brought in have been the worst two Jets head coaches of my lifetime. Rich Kotite and Adam Gase. The two worst head coaches I have ever witnessed, piloting this team have been the only two offensive guys they've hired in my time as a fan. Really unbelievable. GM Island Empire, everyone rally behind Ulbrich. That's what's going to happen. Especially the defense might play even better. They're going to be fired up. They're going to, maybe they'll feel like, the guy who's calling the plays. And I would find it hard to believe that there aren't some defensive guys in that locker room. Some will be upset, but I'm sure there are some guys who feel like the offense not performing and Saleh not holding them accountable isn't great. And you heard Quincy Williams the other day, defensive guy, say, we got to stop saying the same thing. Something's got to change. like enough with and you hear that and you're like, is he talking about Saleh? Because it is the same thing every week. We're going to get better. We're going to fix it. We're going to fix it. It doesn't happen. So let's see. Ulbrich has Hackett to deal with, and that's going to hurt him. It does, but again, and there can be some other things this team could do. I was just thinking to myself earlier today, and listen, if the blocking doesn't get better, it isn't going to matter. But Isaiah Davis, I mean, he's not done anything. It's not his fault. But do you get Izzy Abanikanda active? Get every dude on your roster that runs in the 4-3s on offense on the field if you can't score points, and hope to get him in space and let him break one. So I wouldn't be against that, but first they got to get Breece going. And if there's something there, if there's an issue there, hopefully Ulbrich will be more willing to not be to not be everybody's friend, because I think that hurt Robert Saleh. He didn't want to upset anyone. I'm sure Saleh and Hackett, I'm sure they played a part in the decision that Breece gets the goal line carries. And I get that Braylon got stuff the other day, but we talked about this. Dan Orlovsky showed it. If you're a fan, you're following this stuff and you've seen it. They're lining him up 8 yards deep when he needs a yard and a half. He's getting hit before he's at the 3. He gets to the point where he's still not out of the backfield. He's covered 3 yards and he's still getting hit in the backfield before he gets to the line, and then he gets stuffed. Which coach are they going to hire? Sorry. All right. Which coach are they going to hire? Listen, for permanent, that'll be next season. That'll be the off season if Ulbrich doesn't do well. If Ulbrich does well, he probably stays on. I don't see how Vrabel was a problem. Well, I'm just talking about reports after he left that he was very difficult to work with, and I don't think anyone wants that. Now, listen, if Vrabel had a couple of Super Bowl rings, yeah, okay, maybe you do that, but he doesn't. He's got a decent record, but not a guy that people like working with, and that hurts you. You can be Bill Belichick. You can be a guy with a bunch of rings and say my way or the highway, but when you don't have any rings and you're telling people that it's not going to be pleasant to come to work every day, that makes it difficult. GM Island Empire says Mike McDaniel at OC. Can you imagine that? The Dolphins dump him. I still think he's a good offensive guy. I think he just inexplicably, for genius offensive mind, went into the year without a second quarterback. What else we got? What else we got in the chat? Any coach that comes here needs to be respected. Can't hire a first-timer again. That would be nice, Tails. It's always first-time. Well, almost always first-timers with these guys. And when they hire the retreads, they're garbage retreads. Rich Kotite, Adam Gase, right? The only good one was Parcells. Mike McDaniel sucks. Why would you want him? Look at the way the league was ripping him off last year. And look at when he had it. Mike McDaniel sucks right now because Mike McDaniel didn't have a second quarterback for some odd reason. When he had Tua, who I don't think Tua was that great, but Tua looked like, statistically was one of the better quarterbacks in the league because of Mike McDaniel. Now I get that he wouldn't be bringing Tyreek Hill and Waddle with him, but he'd have some pretty good players. Rodgers is the OC. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that no laughing matter, because we've all talked about that, right? Oh, it doesn't matter that Hackett's here because Rodgers is the guy calling the plays. There were times last week, and this was another thing that was mentioned on the postgame. I think it was Willie Colon, who said, you could see Rodgers mouthing, like, why are we running the ball in spots where they were running the ball and it wasn't working? I don't think it's what we thought it was. I think Hackett's calling the plays. And I saw someone say it in the chat a minute ago. I heard it the other day. It was Mike. I saw a tweet earlier, Mike Garafolo, NFL Network, reporting that the way the Jets are running the offense, they are having Aaron Rodgers go to the huddle with 3 plays to choose from, which Connor Hughes reportedly said that he reached out to a few offensive coaches around the league who all said that's you're putting too much on his plate. You are having him be the offensive coordinator. You're giving him 3 plays to go to the line and decide, and maybe that's why we're seeing all these delay of game penalties. So I don't think Rodgers is the OC, surprisingly. I think that was the expectation, but that's not been the case. How Hackett is still here. Again, my info. You have to remember what Aaron Rodgers said when he came here at his press conference. I mean, it's not as if it wasn't already widely known that he had a great relationship with Nathaniel Hackett. But Rodgers said himself, I love Nate Hackett like a brother. Like to him, in Aaron Rodgers' mind, that's family. You're not going to fire Aaron Rodgers. You're not going to fire a guy who Aaron Rodgers considers to be family. Let's see. Asphalt Jockey says, got to bring in a well-respected guy. Listen, that's the idea. But again, that's all after this season. Kind of, it's almost a moot point right now, wondering about who the next full-time head coach will be, because we are months away from that decision and have the rest of a season to sit through while they figure that out. Bernie says Hackett's the bigger problem. Don't disagree. And this could be a thing where maybe, again, Robert Saleh, who goes out of his way to not hurt anyone's feelings, perhaps he wasn't going up to Nate Hackett and putting a boot, where it belonged and saying, dude, stop doing this and start doing that. Maybe that wasn't happening. And maybe Jeff Ulbrich, who wants to prove he can be a head coach, and this is his first shot, and he's watching his defense go out there and lose football games when they give up 16 points. Maybe Ulbricht's going to say, hey, guys, absolutely. Like, you're going to do what I tell you. You're going to run your scheme, but I'm going to be on the headset, and when you're doing something I don't like, I'm going to tell you. Listen, if they bring in Ulbrich and his plan is to walk in the door and not say anything to the offensive guys, get rid of him now. Like, what's the point? Because Saleh was part of the problem, but Hackett is just as big a part of the problem. Play Brandon Eccles, ball hawk. AP, who are you benching? You benching DJ Reed or Sauce Gardner to play Eccles? That's the problem. Someone's got to go. You're not benching. DJ Reed right now is playing at a higher level than Sauce Gardner, but DJ Reed also has 1 year left on his deal. Do you, as Joe Douglas, do you say, you know what? Eccles is playing well enough as my CB2 when he's in there. Let's trade DJ Reed and get him off that's the only way this is happening. AP, you're not benching DJ Reed. You're not benching Sauce Gardner. Unless you're not trading Sauce. Unless you're saying, let's trade DJ and get a premium pick for a guy who's only got a few games left here and we think will still be good enough on defense to win. If you think you can do that, fine. But I'm not convinced that Eccles is on that level. Granted, he's been fantastic. He's the only corner with any interceptions. I think he's going to, and I said this the other day, he will be in competition to start next year. And he could win that job, but how you get him on the field right now, I don't see how that happens unless you want to say put him in at nickel and bench Michael Carter, whatever's going to happen there. So let's see what coach would come into this mess. Again, no, if you're talking head coach, Draco, they're not going to hire a new head coach in season. They're appointing Ulbrich. He is the coach now. I can't see them bringing in an outsider at this point, as I said the other day, to do what? To implement an entirely new system in week 7, 8, 9. Hey, everyone, it's time for training camp again, but we've only got 4 days to do it. I just don't see that happening. Jets fans have to use some common sense. Saleh got fired because he was mostly trying to get Hackett out. Which I guess you're suggesting this would be Rodgers not wanting Hackett out. And maybe, possibly, because Rodgers, again, this is having said, I kicked this show off by saying I was shocked at the firing because the Jets don't do this. But I also said the only way, not just today, I've said it on other shows, I've said it in previous episodes, the only way Saleh goes is if Rodgers wants him gone. Now, did Saleh go and say, hey, we got to demote Hack, and then Rodgers says, get this guy out of here? We don't know. I'm sure. Listen, look out for the likes. Nobody does this better than Albert Breer. Albert Breer sometime in the near future, or maybe months from now, we'll have a story on how all of this unfolded. Love Breer. Breer's fantastic with getting the juicy details on all that stuff. Asphalt Jockey says, bring back Rex Ryan. That's not going to happen. Like I said, loved Rex. That's not happening. Does have Super Bowl rings as a player. Vrabel, he does, but whole different ball game. Never liked Tyreek Hill. Listen, I can completely understand not liking Tyreek Hill. Anyone who does some of the things he's done off the field, I will not argue with someone who says I don't like that. You're talking now the player, football player, person, completely different things. Amazing football player, not such an amazing human. Let's see. Once Quincy said what he said about accountability, again, I thought that was big. It was big in the moment, and it absolutely could have played a role in this. Crazy Rodgers is the OC, head coach, and GM. Again, I don't dispute that. I've said all along that I think Rodgers is the most powerful guy in the organization. When do we place blame on Keith Carter for the O-line play? That's a point, Ricky, I made when I said earlier about the O-line upgrades. That's what I was getting at. We ripped Keith Carter quite a bit last year. Maybe this is part of what got Saleh fired. Maybe Woody Johnson is looking at Robert Saleh and saying, everyone on the planet was saying last year, Robert, to get a different offensive line coach. And you told everybody, go away. He's my guy. And now this year, they're even worse. Players, we've talked about this a million times. Becton, Brees, Taylor Lewan, they were all mocking the guy. The guy does not have the respect of his current or former players, openly mocking him on social media, which you do not see. That's when he should have been let go. That's when Robert Saleh should have been like, dude, I'm sorry. I like you. I think you're really good. But Keith, you don't have the respect of the players, and we can't have that. Maybe he should have done that. Well, he should have done that. Maybe not doing that, and then them coming out with all these new toys on the offensive line and looking worse. Maybe that's where Woody Johnson said, hey, man, Bob, everybody knew. And now here we are. We can't block it. We can't pick up. They still can't pick up a blitz. I said it the other day. All the defense has to do, just have somebody stunt, run a twist, and the Jets' offensive line falls apart, unprepared. It's not a talent issue, folks. I said it the other day. I'll die on this hill. Don't tell me that Smith, that Simpson, that Tippmann, that AVT, that those guys, and whether it's Moses or Fashanu has struggled in pass pro. Let's not try to sugarcoat that. But with those guys, you should not be averaging 2 yards a carry with Brees Hall at running back and Braylon Allen at running back. Those should not be 2 to 3 yards per carry. Facing light boxes. There's no 7-8 in the box like there was last year and the year before and the year before and the year before because the quarterback sucked. The quarterback is good enough now. The teams are not doing that. And it's not mattering. Robert Saleh, gone as New York Jets head coach. If you're just tuning in. Just going through, engaging a little bit here, getting people's thoughts on it. Sauce is not overrated. Yes, Sauce is not overrated. GM Island Empire. I'm seeing people say, look at the numbers. Look how teams don't throw at him. They don't throw at him. The fact that you drew a flag with Justin Jefferson, and listen, I'm not going to lie to you. I was at the game. Stuff like that is impossible to see from where I was sitting. I was field level, and everything sort of mixes in. And I've been so busy between driving back from London and work. I haven't rewatched the game yet. Normally, I would have rewatched the game by now. So I'm not going to comment too much on the Sauce flags. But even if Sauce had a bad day, like this Sauce is overrated stuff, this needs to stop. 2-time All-Pro in 2 years, Hall of Fame trajectory, and he has a couple of games where he gives up a couple of catches and everybody's, this guy, he's overrated. He's no good. Could not be further from the truth. If it's not a talent issue, it's a coaching issue. So how does Devontae Adams help? Well, Peter, did you not see the Allen Lazard drops the other day? If that's Devontae, those 4 drops, those are 4 catches, and the Jets win the football game. That's how he helps. The coaches are bad, but it's not as if there's not enough talent on this team to overcome it if they're not doing things like dropping 4 passes. Absolutely nuts. Glenn Naughton, Jet Nation Radio. Give me a follow on Twitter at JNRadio_Glenn. We are live Thursday nights. Myself, Chris Schubert, Dylan Terman. They are not here now because none of us knew this was going to happen. But again, at JNRadio_Glenn. Give me a follow. Most times Nets fans can be so short-sighted. I'm assuming you mean Jets fans. I stopped following basketball a long time ago. Right around the time Patrick Ewing missed that layup against the Pacers. Let's see. I can't see Adams coming here with the state of this team. I should have screenshotted it. I saw a headline earlier. Basically, Devontae does not want to go to the Saints. My answer to that, Tails, is that you can't see Adams coming here. He wants to be here. It's been reported that teams who are calling the Raiders believe he wants to come to the Jets. Aaron Rodgers is his guy. And Aaron Rodgers is probably on the phone with him saying, hey, man, my team would be in first place right now if you were here. Because look what Allen did the other day. That should have been you. That should have been a touchdown. We should be in first place with a chance to open up a 2-game lead on Monday night. Devontae Adams, why wouldn't he want to come here? And then imagine what that would do for Garrett Wilson. But they got to get on. Garrett Wilson, Aaron Rodgers right now, I don't know if the issue, we keep saying they have to get on the same page. It's been enough. You got to be more. I get that Garrett Wilson had, 13 catches the other day? He had 22 targets. 22. And a lot of his catches were like quick, short stuff over the middle. Couldn't hit him deep down the field. Missed him on a would-be touchdown. Would have won that damn football game. If Rodgers hits Garrett Wilson in stride. Hell, he didn't even have to hit him in stride. He had so much room. Just get it anywhere in the general vicinity. And Wilson could have come down with it, and that would have been ball game. Devontae Adams absolutely helps. Again, Peter, as I just said, Devontae Adams helps by catching footballs. Allen Lazard killed them the other day by not catching footballs. And when you catch footballs, you keep drives alive, you take pressure off Garrett Wilson, it will help immensely. Immensely. Because part of what we hear with Rodgers is that his offense is so complex and it takes so long for teams and receivers to get on the same page. I think Adams himself said the other day, it took 2 or 3 years so him and Rodgers were really simpatico. I get what you're saying here, Peter, that you don't think it helps because of the coaching. The coaching staff is terrible. I get it. But there is a point at which a team can add enough talent that you can overcome the coaching. It's not common, but the example I always use is Barry Switzer in Dallas. That guy wasn't a good head coach. He won a Super Bowl because he had enough talent. This team, this team just had back-to-back games where the defense gave up less than 20 points. You don't think Devontae Adams opening things up for Garrett Wilson, giving Aaron Rodgers an elite target, even if he's not what he used to be, he's still damn good? You don't think that adds a touchdown per game? That we can disagree, Peter. We'll see what happens. I think it's going to happen. I think Devontae Adams to the Jets is going to happen. And listen, this is about Saleh getting fired, but I'm going to take a second here to talk about what I was logging on to talk about until I saw the firing. Right, and that's my point, Peter. That's exactly what I'm saying. There was enough talent to overcome the coaching. You can build a team that's so good that even having a bad coach is you can manage with that. Again, rare but possible. But so Joe Douglas, you would imagine, I saw a report earlier that as early as this morning, the Jets and Raiders had talked about, no worries, Peter. I hope you get what I'm saying. I understand what you mean. It feels like it's a waste of time because of the coaching staff, but you can't stop swinging. But report from Connor Hughes yesterday saying that the holdup in the Devontae Adams deal is that the Raiders want teams to take on all of his money. And there are people above Joe Douglas who, I wish I could find, I'm trying to find the exact tweet right here, right now. Give me just a second. Hop on the forums on Jet Nation. That's where to get all the info, folks. Let's see. Wow, see, look at this. This is great. Just yesterday on the Jet Nation forums, one of our posters started a thread saying, Woody Johnson, it is time for you to do a midseason firing. Good call. Good call, DCAT. Playing next week, as bad as things have been. Yeah, I'm trying to. So basically, I'm not finding the tweet. I will throw it out there. Basically, the gist of it was Connor Hughes was saying that it's not just, here we go. Ownership sets the budget. So this is an important point that I want to make because I've made this before. So a couple things I'll touch on here. Okay, so this is just in an exchange with another fan on Twitter about spending or not spending on Devontae Adams. Connor Hughes says ownership sets the budget, not Joe Douglas. If you look at some of let's talk about two of the worst moves or decisions we've seen from Joe Douglas, right? Not having a backup quarterback last year, which we talked about, and now this Hassan Reddick deal where he trades for a guy that then refuses to report and you gave up assets to get him. For those, and I get it. I'm a JD guy. Love Joe Douglas. I think he's done a lot more good than bad. And I think fans who think every move has to be a home run, it's too much with the Madden and the fantasy, and they think it's just easy. It's not. Look at the numbers. We've dug down on that. We've talked about that on our show. The hit rates across the NFL versus Joe Douglas's hit rates. He's fine. He's better than most. So for Joe Douglas to have built the team he built last year, knowing he had to replace Zach Wilson, going out, jumping through all the hoops, the months-long negotiations to bring in Aaron Rodgers to make this a Super Bowl contender, and then he doesn't bring in a legitimate QB2. I said at the time, I said, this is malpractice by Joe Douglas. If Joe Douglas doesn't bring in, and the comparison I made, and I was a little bit off because I forgot Rick Myra was a late addition with Parcells, but basically when the Jets didn't have a backup to Vinny when they were Super Bowl favorites. And Joe Douglas went and did the same thing, and it really aggravated me. And the more I thought about it, I said, well, why wouldn't Joe Douglas do that? I mean, he's not, I get some people don't like him. That's fine. He's not an idiot. He built what people were, again, the Jets were top 10 in the NFL last year for Super Bowl odds, which, that doesn't mean anything. It means that an objective observer, Vegas, was just looking at what every team in the NFL had done, and no one's better at predicting this stuff than Vegas. And they had the Jets as a top 10 team. 8, I think. They were 8th in the NFL. But then Joe Douglas doesn't have a backup quarterback to prepare for the possibility of his elderly quarterback getting hurt. Why would he not do that? Do you think Joe Douglas is super worried about Woody Johnson's billions of dollars? Or do you think ownership said, hey, Joe Douglas, we just spent a boatload on Aaron Rodgers. We gave up a bunch of picks. Well, a bunch of value points in picks. We're paying him a ton of money. Even with the pay cut, he's making a ton of money. And we've still got Zach Wilson on the books, who's making $8-9 million last year. You go out and get yourself a vet minimum quarterback. We're not signing off on another $10 million at the quarterback position. You've just spent 50, 60, 70, whatever Rodgers' deal was cut down to. Many tens of millions on one guy, $10 million on the guy behind him. We're not giving you another chunk of money for another guy. And then later, there were some outlets that reported Zach Rosenblatt. We had him on Jet Nation Radio. He talked to us about it, where he said, "Yeah, I think this played a role. I think ownership was clamping down on the money that Joe Douglas was allowed to spend at quarterback." And now you look at this offseason, and this was part of Connor Hughes' point. The Jets didn't spend big this offseason. This really had the look. Here's what this offseason looked like, and I don't blame Woody for this. It's as if Woody Johnson said to Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, okay, guys, Aaron Rodgers got hurt. You get a mulligan, but we're not going on another spending spree. You come back next year with pretty much the same roster or pretty much the same payroll. We're not handing out tens and hundreds of millions to new guys, because if we fail this year, you're both fired, and I don't want the next guy to have to deal with all that. That would be a totally reasonable take from Woody Johnson. And now you move to it would be reasonable from Woody, but coming from ownership, and ownership being the one saying you can't spend anymore, that would make sense. It was a theory I had at the time and gained credibility over time. And now you look at the Hassan Reddick situation. If Joe Douglas knows that he's not allowed to hand out any huge contracts, do you really think he trades for Hassan Reddick without, and this is what's been reported, that the Jets were told by Reddick, I will play under my current deal, and if I play better, if I prove that I'm still a beast in your system, then we'll talk extension. And that was what the Jets told him. Come in, prove it, and we'll talk. I don't think Joe Douglas makes that trade without those assurances. And you can say, oh, well, it wasn't in writing, so it doesn't matter. Sometimes in life, no matter your job, you have to take a calculated risk. Okay? Joe Douglas took a calculated risk. And teams, they forecast this stuff. I have no doubt that Joe Douglas sat down with his number crunchers and said to them, What does a Devontae Adams holdout look like? How much money will he lose at what point? And again, keeping in mind, this is a guy whose holdout was based on getting more money. And they probably said to Joe Douglas, well, with the $50,000 a day in camp and the preseason checks, by the time we hit week 2 or 3, he's going to be down like $6 million. And Joe Douglas, just as any logical human being would say, well, he's not going to do that. I mean, he's told us he'll come in and play under his current deal. If he goes back on that and lies and doesn't show up, he's going to lose more money than he will ever make back. So, yeah, all the risk is on him. I have no reason not to believe he's going to come in and try to earn a new deal. Let's go get him. And Joe Douglas brings him in, expecting him to play under the current deal. And then Devontae says, nope, I want the money now. And Joe Douglas says to Woody, he wants the money now. And Woody says, no, we're not spending big. You told us you were trading for this guy because he was going to play under his deal. Yeah, that's what he told us. His agents told us he was going to play under his current deal. But now they're not. Okay, Joe. Looks like you traded for a guy we're not going to pay for. And now Joe Douglas has egg on his face because a player went back on his word and the owner won't pony up the cash to get the guy in. Again, Joe Douglas is fighting for his job. Do you think he's going to let $10 million be the difference between him having a job next year and not? I would imagine Joe Douglas, having brought him in, if it was up to him, would just say, here's your extra 10, 11, 12 million, get in here and play. But that didn't happen. And so now from Connor Hughes, the comment about the ownership controlling the cash and the reports that the Raiders are unwilling to eat any of Adams' money, I believe, just guessing, I don't do that pretend I have sources thing that some bloggers love so much. My guess is that the Raiders aren't budging on the money, and Woody is saying, we're not giving you more money, or at least not whatever he's got left on his deal. I think it gets done eventually. I do think it gets done. I think we do see Devontae Adams in a Jets uniform Monday night. Just guessing. Who the hell knows? I also said I thought we'd see Hassan Reddick in training camp week 1 because I didn't think he would start giving up game checks. Oops. We're all guessing, folks. We're all out here guessing. But let's see. Grant says, call me crazy. Give John Gruden a call. But when, Grant? Listen, if you want to bring a guy in now as a head coach, if that's what you're talking about, you're not installing an entirely new system in 4 days. And you can't half-ass it. You want to bring in an offensive consultant? Maybe. But Gruden, look, you'd like the problem is in season, you're not going to hire someone away from another team. Guys have their jobs. So it's not like there's a great young offensive mind sitting out there waiting to be hired. And again, I'm just talking about in terms of bringing somebody in as consultant because head coach, it's just that's a little too much to ask. Like I said, give me a follow at Jet Nation Radio, at Jet Nation Radio _Glenn. Sorry, at JN Radio _Glenn on Twitter. We are live Thursday nights. Myself, Chris Schubert, Dylan Terraman, who are not here right now. Dylan's at work. Chris tried a few times and got booted. Bad connection. Hopefully he's able to try again. We'll see what happens with that. And let's see. Nope, nothing there. So crazy times. And what does it mean? Like I said, the interesting thing, Monday night just got way more interesting. I mean, it's not as if we weren't going to be tuning in anyway. But now you've got to see how this team comes out and plays. Or do they come out and play inspired football? And how do they look offensively? How do the Jets look offensively? Defensive-minded head coach. Does Ulbrich force the run? Does Ulbrich say, keep pounding, keep chopping wood, even if we're getting stuffed all day, eventually it's going to click? I think back, and the Jets haven't had this yet. They haven't had this opportunity is a weird way to phrase it. They haven't had this situation where they've been down by so much. If you think back to the Eric Mangini era, and I get it, Mangini failed as a head coach. He wasn't good at it. But one thing he did that I thought foresight, I thought it took some guts. He conceded a loss. The Jets played the Jaguars in Jacksonville. I was talking about this game the other day. They lost 41-3, I believe, was the final score, and it was whatever it was at halftime. The Jets obviously weren't going to win that game, 28, whatever. I don't remember. But the game was over at halftime, a 41-3 loss to the Jaguars. For those of you who remember this game, I don't think the Jets threw the ball one time in the second half. It was as if Eric Mangini just said, look, there's no substitute for game reps. We can't get practice at this high a quality. So we're going to spend the next 30 minutes working on running the football. And I don't care down, distance, we are running the ball on every single play. And they did. And now going off memory, I think we saw some improvement in the weeks that followed. So again, Ulbrich, does he take that approach? Does he say, pound it and let's just grind it out till we get this right? Do we see more outside runs? You look at a lot of runs up the middle into the pile where they're not getting much push. You're facing these light boxes. Let's see some stretch stuff. Let's see some counter, some cutback runs from Brees, from Braylon. Let's get Izzy involved. There are some things the Jets can do to make this better. There are some, as I said, bring in Fursker, who is not an all-world guy, but he's better than some of the guys they have out there right now. Let's get Izzy some carries. If, God forbid, he gets into open space, that's going to be a huge gain. God forbid you let him leak out of the backfield and hit him on a wheel route. Nobody's catching him. So there are some things they can do to try to make this better. Mike says bench Lazard. I think if you get Devontae Adams, that's exactly what's going to happen. In the meantime, listen, I would prefer Mike Williams get the Lazard reps at this point. Mike Williams, far more reliable guy. But I think a big part of this is, excuse me, I think a big part of this is Aaron Rodgers feeling like Lazard is the only guy, the only receiver in the room who they have that chemistry of, again, the complexities of what Rodgers wants. Lazard knows, so he's going to be in the right. It's almost like doesn't matter if Lazard has a couple of drops, but another guy isn't as reliable in being where he's supposed to be. But at the same time, hey, coaches, let's coach and get these guys in the right spots if that's been an issue. The Garrett Wilson thing, as we've said, it's like, is it a chemistry thing or is it just, and it might be time to start asking, it is Rodgers' accuracy slipping to the point where it looks like it's chemistry, but he's just off? Because a lot of his throws, Garrett is twisting and turning and contorting, and the placement isn't really what you would expect it to be. So you're watching and thinking, did Garrett run the right route? Did Rodgers put it in the wrong spot? Did Rodgers see something that he expected Garrett to see and Garrett didn't? Like, what is the disconnect? And again, you can talk to me about Garrett having 13 for 100 and whatever the other day in the 1-yard touchdown. But those are, forced targets, and you're doing it where a lot of what they did, a lot of Garrett's catches were just stuff right over the middle. Just nothing down the field, nothing where he made a big play down the field. But that's the news of the day, folks. Robert Saleh is out as Jets head coach. Nobody, well, there's always a handful of folks. But all we have to go off of a history. And based on the history of this team, of this organization, of this ownership group, I did not believe in a million years that this would happen. But it has. Again, I didn't think it would happen without the blessing of Rodgers. And maybe when that Albert Breer piece comes out later this season or this offseason, maybe we'll find out that Aaron Rodgers went to Woody Johnson. Or maybe Robert Saleh wanted to make some changes on the staff that Rodgers didn't approve of, and he went to Woody Johnson. But whatever, and maybe, again, maybe it wasn't Aaron. Maybe Woody Johnson, as I said earlier, perhaps Woody Johnson felt like this might really be my last shot as an owner to win something, and nothing is changing or getting better with this head coach. He's got to go. We'll find out in time, folks. We'll find out in time what happened, how it happened, why it happened. I mean, we know the record ultimately is why it happened, but why this week? Why now? If I had to guess, I'm gonna make my best guess. This is one of the possibilities I said. I think Woody what I said earlier. I think Woody looked at this and said, I don't know when I'll have another chance. And this guy isn't getting better. So he's got to go. So I think Woody did this. Even without the prompting of Rodgers. I could be wrong. Like I said, we'll find out. Rich says, would they blow it up next year with a new head coach? Well, it depends on what you mean by blow it up, Rich. Like clear out the coaching staff, I would imagine. New head coach is going to want his own people. Joe Douglas, I think if this team plays well enough over the final 11 games, I think Joe Douglas stays. As he should. And it's not just me. People can say, oh, Glenn, you're just a Joe Douglas stan. Am I the only person saying out loud that this team has way too much talent to not be winning? And I've said, going back to last preseason, when I asked the question, who's on the hotter seat, Joe Douglas or Robert Saleh? I said all along, there's enough talent here to win. That's because of the work of Joe Douglas. If you're not winning, that's on the coach because there's enough talent to win. And now they are. WR speculating Rodgers had something to do with the firing is unfair and irresponsible. No, I think claiming to know that he did or to say he definitely did would be irresponsible. To speculate, I think, is fair because you're going to go through the list of possibilities. Because again, keep in mind, we have an owner who has had a lot of bad head coaches and has never fired one in season. So yeah, let's go through the list of things that may have happened. And that, I mean, is that impossible? WR, is it completely impossible that Aaron Rodgers said, I think we can move on from this guy? And again, I'm not saying he did. And I just said, I think this was Woody. Like if I'm putting out one theory, call it a conspiracy theory, or my best guess is that it was Woody. That Woody said, I same mistakes over and over, same excuses over and over. I want to win something. Get this guy out of here. So that's my I guess speculative or theory. I almost said philosophy, not philosophy. That's my theory. Oh, hang on. Just about to sign off, but happy to stay on for a little longer. My good friend Chris Schubert finally able to join us. Chris, I was seconds away from signing off, but I will gladly sit here for as long as you want. Huge news. I've rambled on for an hour and 10 minutes. What do you got?
So hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully I sound okay. Okay, that's a good step. I tried to get in touch with the stream via a parking lot when I was on my way to work. That didn't work, so got myself to the office, got myself in front of the setup, and I'm here to share thoughts. So I had a nice long 45-minute drive to think about this, and I have a lot of thoughts. I didn't get a chance to hear all that you had to say, so maybe I'll sound super repetitive. In a vacuum, firing Robert Saleh is not a bad decision. Robert Saleh is a coach that has had this team constantly unprepared, has had this team constantly out-schemed, out-coached, outmanned. It just has not gone well in the Robert Saleh era, 20-36. We know what he is off of buys, off of days of rest. He just has not been a very good football coach. But I can't help but constantly go back to the point of what does this actually achieve? What does this actually do for the team? Because nobody has complained about the performance of the defense week in and week out. And you've now made the DC, Jeff Ulbrich, the head coach, the interim head coach. So now that's going to take his attention. It's going to take his duties away from focusing on the defense every week. So that's going to be a problem. And the thing that has been a constant issue throughout Robert Saleh's tenure, specifically this year, remains completely unchanged. Nothing about the offense is unchanged. So again, in a vacuum, the idea of firing Robert Saleh, I can get on board with, and I don't necessarily disagree with it. I don't think it changes how I feel about this current team. And I also hate the process of how we got here. You needed these 5 games to determine that Robert Saleh wasn't the head coach of your football team. Something during these 5 games was different than the first 3 years that he was here that made you think that you needed to make a change. And so I hate the process. I hate how we got to this point, and I just worry that it is not going to lead to the changes that some people think it's going to lead to.
I don't think any of what you said. Can you hear me?
I hear you fine. You sound excellent, Glenn.
Great. I don't disagree with anything you've said, But the point I made, Chris, because I'm sitting here, obviously, going through the myriad of reasons what could have triggered this. What was the breaking point? And I saw a tweet the other day, Chris, that said Woody Johnson left his London owner's box in the second quarter of the game. And you remember they were down 17-0 in a hurry. And that kind of caught my attention. I thought, probably nothing, but man, you went all the way out to London and you walked out early because of the performance. WR says Woody just released a statement.
I'm looking for it. That's why I'm looking to the other side of the screen. But I don't see anything as of right now. I've got it. I can read it if you'd like.
Go ahead, Chris.
This morning, I informed Robert Saleh that he will no longer serve as the head coach of the Jets. I thanked him for his hard work these past 3.5 years. Didn't even make it 3.5, to be honest, and wish him and his family well moving forward. This was not an easy decision, but we are not where we should be given our expectations, and I believe now is the best time for us to move in a different direction. Jeff Ulbrich will serve as our interim head coach for the remainder of the season. He is a tough coach who has the respect of the coaches and players on this team. I believe he, along with the coaches on this staff, can get the most out of our talented team and attain the goals we established this offseason. Great. It's a statement from the owner. I'm sorry. But, Jeff Ulbrich, I like Jeff. Jeff's been great. What does Jeff Ulbrich bring to the table as a head coach that is different from Robert Saleh? I don't know the answer to that question yet.
Well, okay, and that's fair because nobody does. But here was my thoughts, Chris, as I went through the possible reasons why did this happen now. I think Woody, and I said, maybe Aaron, because I said earlier in the week, and weeks ago, I don't think there's a move unless Aaron wants it. And I'm not completely dismissing that possibility, but I think Woody is doing this now sooner rather than later because he's watching his 40-year-old quarterback get beat up, probably realizing next season, this guy's not going to hang around. This is the 1 year I have with this guy. I've owned this team for decades. We've never had a quarterback of this caliber. This is the 1 year I have before we possibly go back into quarterback purgatory next season. And if I sit around and wait until we're 3-7 or 4-8, then it's too late. But right now, and people always talk about this now. We saw it with Antonio Pierce. We saw it with Jeff Saturday, that head coach bump. Teams come out fired up when there's a new head coach in place. They do that this Monday against the Bills. It's like you're back at week 1 because you are tied for first place. You've got the same exact record as the best team in your division, and you've got 11 games to do something. You don't know what Jeff Ulbrich brings, but you know what Robert Saleh brings. And what Robert Saleh brings is unpreparedness, lack of discipline, and a flat team week in and week out, at least on offense. And what did we hear so much this offseason? Things are going to get better because Robert Saleh is going to be more involved with the offense. Well, through 5 games, they've scored the exact number of points with Aaron Rodgers that they did with Zach Wilson.
So, and I know you know this because we spend a lot of time talking offline. We just as much time as we spend on the air together talking football, me and Dylan talk a lot of football offline. So you know that I am not a solid guy. I don't want my position on this show for the listeners to make it think that I don't think this is a good decision. At the end of the day, in a vacuum, getting rid of Robert Saleh is a good decision. I don't think Robert Saleh was a good head football coach for the New York Jets. That is unequivocally my stance on this. Process matters because process tells me how you're going to navigate a lot of other stuff. The process on this stinks. The process on this is really bad because you're 5 games into the season and you fire a head coach. You're 2-3. I've seen coaches stick around for a lot less. Doug Peterson's still hanging on in Jacksonville. That team stinks. That team is bad. He's still hanging on down there. So again, the process for this is what I have the most issue with. Now, I want to talk about 2 things that you mentioned. I want to talk about Ulbrich, but let me go back to Woody for a second. You, I think, are giving Woody a little bit too much credit here because I think there's one person who had a say in this decision. I think there's one person who made a phone call that changed all of this. And maybe this is me putting the conspiracy theory hat on. That's fine. He certainly loves to do it every Tuesday when he's on with Pat McAfee. This has all the hallmarks of Aaron Rodgers being fed up with somebody and being done. Because Woody watched Robert Saleh for the last 3 years just be bad as a coach, and he stuck around. This offseason had an opportunity to move on from Saleh, start fresh, start clean. They didn't. And 5 games into the season, you all of a sudden change your mind when your team is 2-3. And Glenn, the last 2 weeks, they had the ball late in the fourth quarter with a chance to win the game. It wasn't like they were getting blown out. It wasn't like the doors were getting blown off of them. Last 2 weeks, they had the ball in their hands with Aaron Rodgers with a chance to win the football game. They just didn't do it. So to me, this reeks of Aaron Rodgers just being done with Saleh and wanting to move on. and wanting to get somebody new. Now to Jeff Ulbrich, I hope, I don't know Jeff personally, have had a chance to see him at a couple of Senior Bowls that he's been at, have heard him speak. If there's one thing I hope for Jeff Ulbrich is because he's the interim head coach, he looks at this and says, I feel differently about the way this needs to run in comparison to everybody else. I view this differently than Robert Saleh does. I want to run this team differently than Saleh did. I want to do things my way. And maybe that means he leans on Hackett a little bit and says, dude, you got to fix this. You got to do something better. Because the way Saleh was a head coach was very laissez-faire, very laid back, very let the coordinators do their job. Maybe Jeff Ulbrich, being a DC, watching all of this go on, has said internally, if I ever get this opportunity, I'm not going to do it this way. But the unfortunate part of that, Glenn, is we don't know. And this is a massive roll of the dice. It's a massive roll of the dice to do this. And so I hope for this season's sake that Jeff Ulbrich comes in and brings, because the offense is the problem right now, goes to Hackett. Hackett, you listen to me. We're going to do things differently now. This is the way this is going to go. And you know what? If he pisses off Rodgers and Rodgers wants to try to get him fired, go right ahead. Go right ahead, Aaron, because you're going to look bad. You're going to be the guy that looks bad in all this.
Exactly. And that's basically, that's something I touched on earlier, Chris, and I said, Saleh, and I was, you probably remember back to last year. That's when I was out on Saleh, when it was clear that friendships and not offending and not hurting people's feelings was his priority. I would have no doubt that he was too soft on Hackett, on what was happening behind the scenes. And maybe the Jets expect Ulbrich to go in there and say, look, I'm just like any head coach. I'm going to have the headset on. I'm going to hear what you're calling. And if I don't like it, I'm going to cut you off, say, no, not that. Like, we're going to hopefully get to a point where you talk enough leading up to the game to have a vision of what you expect. But I think Robert Saleh was entirely too hands-off. We didn't see the changes. We didn't see any adjustments. We just saw the same stuff from the offense, not scoring week after week, unprepared week after week, not creative week after week. So to your point, though, Chris, because you're not wrong in saying that we don't know what to expect from Ulbrich, but the problem is we know exactly what to expect from Saleh. That's the issue. Right. Is that you and we talked about this before the year, right? You, me, Dylan, we talked about how our biggest concern was what happens if this team plays to the level we expect, but then playoff time comes and it's Robert Saleh against any head coach. How often? Now, again, we don't know what to expect from Ulbrich, but we know not to expect Robert Saleh to outcoach anyone.
Sure. And that's the problem is the issue that I have with it is I still think they're going to be a team that gets outcoached because of who is calling the stuff on the offensive side of the ball. And unfortunately, until Jeff Ulbrich shows me that things are going to be different, that's my default position when it comes to this team right now. Because, yeah, you fired the head coach, but we've talked about on this show how many times that on Sundays, Saleh's not calling the defense and he's not calling the offense. So the same two people that are calling those sides of the ball that have led to this team being 2-3 and being in this position in the first place are still the coaches that are overseeing things on Sunday. So they have to prove it to me. Jeff Ulbrich has to prove to me that he's going to do things differently than Saleh. Because if he doesn't, Glenn, if he is the same approach as Saleh, this team's going nowhere. This team is stuck. Can I point out something really important? And I want to give credit where credit is due. And I think one of the cool things we do on this show is we don't pretend like other Jets podcasts and Jets people exist. Like we shout them out and we talk about what other people say. Somebody tweeted at Robbie Sabo, who I think does an excellent job covering the Jets.
Yeah.
And said, does it matter as long as Hackett and Carter are still in their respective roles? And I thought his answer was really important here. And this is from Robbie Sabo on Twitter. We'll see. OCs can never be viewed as independent of the head coach since the offensive game plan falls within the entire game plan, spearheaded by the head coach. Perhaps it won't matter, but Ulbrich is now the game planning boss, the man who sets the vision. And that does matter when regarding the OC. We'll find out. That's the answer.
Yeah.
This only changes if Jeff Ulbrich has a different game plan approach than Robert Saleh does. If he doesn't, it's going to be the same old for the remainder of the season. So that's it. This all, and I hate that we're here. This all falls down to one important question. Has Jeff Ulbrich learned from all the mistakes Robert Saleh has made? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Until he actually coaches some football games, it's all unknown at this point. But it would be unfathomable to me to have a guy go and do the same thing. But listen, as fans, right, we have to acknowledge, whether we like it or not. And I'm not saying this is the case, but he could be worse. It's hard to envision, But listen, how many head coaches are we at now where we're like, well, he can't be worse than the last guy. Oh, Bowles can't be worse than Rex. Oh my God. Well, Gase can't be worse than Bowles. Oh my God. Like, and is it worse, 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 worse? So I'm not saying it will. I'm just saying, until we see something, let's hold off on what this will be. But I think that by bringing in a new coach, like I said, the team is going to rally. I expect the team to rally. I expect Ulbrich to be less willing. And Ulbrich, let's not forget now, with this being his first gig, he's going to have maybe a sense of urgency that maybe we didn't see from Saleh, and maybe less willing to put up with mistakes. Like, I want to see how he handles the penalties. I want to see if the penalties get better, get worse, if guys are held accountable when penalties are committed. I want to see if we see, do we see some more motion? But something you said earlier, Chris, that's important. And everyone's talked about how this team is, they're one play away. They're this close every week. Well, that to me says Ulbrich doesn't have to be a lot better than Saleh, just a little bit better. Let's see a slight upgrade. And let's see, maybe, Chris, is Devontae Adams far behind?
Oh, I was talking to our good friend Kyle Krabs earlier today. I had about a 40-minute conversation on my drive in. I vented a little bit before I got to this show, and I said I expect Adams to get done in the next 2 hours. I expect Adams to be done by end of day at this point. And to your point, Glenn, Ulbrich doesn't have to be a lot better. I do find it very telling, at least personally, that Saleh gets fired and they make Ulbrich the interim and not Hackett. That's telling. And it is something to just keep an eye on. And he said in his statement that Ulbrich is the head coach for the remainder of the season. If Jeff Ulbrich wants to use this as a launching pad to either, one, stay as the full-time head coach of the New York Jets, because, Glenn, they went from defensive guy to defensive guy, which is rare. You don't normally do that. If you fire a guy who is good at one side of the ball in the middle of the season, you usually flip to the other side with the interim. That's normally what you do. When you fire a defensive head coach, normally in the offseason, you're like, I'm going to go with an offensive head coach. You normally flip the script. They didn't. They stayed with Ulbrich, probably because they feel like he's the one guy that can galvanize the room the best over Hackett. And that says a lot about how we should feel about Nathaniel Hackett.
Exactly.
But we're here, and Diana Rossini just put out a tweet that said the Jets have no plans of firing Hackett at this time. Like, that's not on the table. So here's what Jeff Ulbrich has to answer. And he's got to do it in a hurry because this team plays their next 3 games in prime time. Monday night, Sunday night, Thursday night. This team is all over prime time the next 3 weeks. He has to show to the world that he is going to do things differently than Robert Saleh. He cannot go to the podium and say, we're going to continue doing what we're doing. Because if you do that, man, that's the easiest way for me to check out for this season. And I'm still skeptical. I'm still on the fence. I still see who's running things on the offensive side of the ball, and I still think that's the biggest problem. And I still don't think that's changing because, and I'm not going to call him stubborn, Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old. He's done things a certain way for his entire life, and his entire adult life, his entire quarterback life. It is almost impossible to change the way that you do things. So you're stuck doing it this way, and you have to hope that he's able to figure it out. So we'll see. I hopefully I'm not rambling too much, and hopefully what I'm saying makes sense. I get the decision to fire Saleh. I think in a vacuum it's okay. I think the process here stinks. I think if you were going to fire him, you should have fired him before the season even began. These 5 games didn't really change anything. And here we are, and Jeff Ulbrich has to answer the most important question. Is he different from Robert Saleh? And I just don't know the answer, and that's a scary place to be. It is a scary place with the expectations that a lot of people have for this football team to be at a place where I'm questioning whether or not the new head coach is any different than the old head coach.
Yeah, well, again, until we see him in action, we won't know. What I would like to see, listen, when I hear people talk about pass protection, right? Aaron Rodgers is under assault. He's getting beat up. He doesn't have time to throw deep. I mean, he's an NFL quarterback. We do see plays where a quarterback takes a 2-step drop and lets it rip. Not every ball that you throw down the field has to be a 7-step drop. So one thing I'm doing, if I'm Ulbrich, I'm going to say take some early shots.
Yeah.
Let's put some of our Mike Williams, in my mind, is underutilized. Let's get Mike Williams on one boundary. Let's get Garrett Wilson on the other. And whoever's not being doubled, go 4 wide if you have to, go 1 back, and those guys on the outside, 2-step drop and let it rip and throw some footballs down the field with the best thrower of the football in NFL history. And let's make some big. I talked about it earlier, Chris. Garrett Wilson may have had 13 catches. How many of them were within 5, 6, 7 yards of the line of scrimmage?
Almost all of them.
They're dump offs over the middle.
Yeah, I just I hate to put this much on Jeff Ulbrich as the interim head coach, but he has to change almost everything, because I sit here and I'm listening to you and I'm trying to get excited about the decision to move on from Saleh and to go to Ulbrich, and I sit here, Glenn, and they still have the same offensive coordinator who's designing the offense. They still have the same O-line coach that's allowing Breece Hall to get blown up in the backfield for -3 yards every play. I see a defensive coordinator that now has to remove himself from those duties to be the head coach, and I worry about the defense falling back because they can't afford that. With where they are offensively and still trying to figure it out, they can't afford the defense to take a step back. They can't play a shootout right now. They can't win a game 34-30. They can't do it. They can't do what the Bengals and the Ravens did on Sunday. If they play that game, they get destroyed. They can't play that way. They can't play that way. They'll lose 48-7 every week. So the thing that worries me about this is there's so much about this team that has led them to be in this spot that is the same. And the one thing you decided to change is, I think, where the area of strength is. And so I just worry about this being a very, very wobbly house of cards. That doesn't mean the house of cards can't stay up. Okay? It can. It's just going to be a very, very delicate dance that Jeff Ulbrich has to do. And for a guy that has no head coaching experience, you're asking a tall task in this market. So I'm rooting for him. I want this team to make the playoffs. I want them to break the streak. I want this to be exciting. By the way, let me just, I should have said this at the beginning, and apologies for not doing so. This sucks for Robert Saleh. I never want to see somebody lose a job, right? I think Saleh's a good dude. I think he's a good defensive coach. People losing their jobs stinks in sports. It does. It stinks in life. It's not fun. So please don't take this as like us being excited that Robert Saleh lost his job. I don't want it.
I made the point earlier.
I don't want it to be taken that way.
I made the point he had to go, but I think he's a good dude. Right. And I wish him nothing but the best moving on. I wanted nothing but success for him here. It obviously didn't happen. You don't get to hang around in this business when that's the case.
Right.
But totally different with Gase. Like Gase, I don't think wasn't a good guy. So I'm like, whatever. I'm not happy, but I feel no sympathy.
Right. And
Robert Saleh, totally different story. Like,
I just don't want people to think we're taking a victory lap for Saleh getting fired.
No,
right. I think it's the right decision. I think it needed to be done, but I'm not like sitting here going, "Oh, great."
Yeah, I'm not like
Saleh.
reveling in it. Like, good for him. Like I was shocked, Chris. We've talked about how the Johnsons have never done this before. The Jets as an organization, Leon Hess rarely did it. Firing in season is not something they do, which again, that was the one part where I thought this had, because just to stay consistent, I've been saying in recent weeks, if Saleh goes in season, it's because Rodgers called for it. And so I'm not dismissing that possibility. I'm putting myself in Woody's shoes, and with them saying that he walked out of that game early the other day, I couldn't help but wonder then if he's thinking, damn it, how many chances am I going to have with a quarterback? Can I really afford to keep this coach around to squander this season away and then have that quarterback retire, and then we're back to square one next year with a bad head coach? But Albert Breer will get the story. We will know at some point, what will happen. Peter Yeti says Woody had a QB of this caliber in Favre. Right. But Favre got injured and everything fell apart. So he's probably realizing, he's probably watching Aaron Rodgers hobble along and thinking, can we put a game plan together that doesn't include my quarterback getting hit 15 times?
I am going to be extremely fascinated because, Glenn, you know what today is. Today's Tuesday. You know what happens on Tuesdays. You know who shows up on Pat McAfee's show. And you know who talks today. And I will be interested in one of two things happens. If he doesn't show altogether, if he if he skips this week, or if he does show up, what he says. Yeah. Because I think that's going to tell us a lot about how this went down.
Yeah. Yeah, because he is, one thing about him, he can be frank from time to time and open up a little bit more than maybe some other people would. But now, would he, if he thinks it'll make him look bad? He's not. What time do they do that? Do you know? Is that a set time?
McAfee goes live in 16 minutes, and I think Rogers Tuesday's in the second hour of the show. So I think. I don't know.
So hour and 15 minutes?
Yeah.
So that's right around the time I'm leaving for work. But I have an hour drive to work. So
you'll be listening.
I'll be tuned in. Listen, I'm still a little bit shocked.
Stunned.
As I said, from a football perspective, it had to happen. From a human being perspective, I feel bad for the guy.
I'm just surprised they did it. I'm just surprised they did it when they did it, right? If they would have come back from London and then struggled again on Monday and lost to a division rival, and then they were 2-4, I could see, okay, let's stop this in its tracks. Let's make sure this doesn't slip off the rails, right? The last 2 weeks, they had the ball with a chance to win in the fourth quarter, and they're 2-3, right? So the timing felt weird. The timing felt odd. The decision itself, again, I think we've talked about how we don't think Saleh is a good coach, and we thought he was holding the team back in some regards. I just think the timing of it is incredibly suspect.
Yeah, and I think, again, we've mentioned it a couple times, right? Having a chance to win. Maybe that's part of it too. Maybe Woody's thinking with a different coach, we win these games. Like, this guy is a big reason why we're not. Who knows? We'll find out. We're not in Woody's head. We're not in Aaron's head. We don't have anybody's phone tapped. So we don't know what's going on, but we will find out in the coming days, weeks, and months what unfolded at One Jets Drive. Chris, glad you were able to hop on.
Yes.
Shame Dylan couldn't. But we will be live Thursday night for sure. Listen, folks, one of us may go live again later if more news breaks. If I can break away from work at work, I might go live if anything else comes up. But as for now, we will cut this one off here. We're at an hour and a half. Shocking news: Robert Saleh gone. Give Chris a follow on Twitter at Chris Schubert _. Give me a follow on Twitter at JNRadio _Glenn. Live Thursday nights. Me, Chris, Dylan Terraman will be there to break this down and more. Talk some Jets Bills preview, and hopefully we might be going live in the next couple hours with some Devontae Adams news. Chris, who knows? We'll see. Have a good one, Jets fans.